What does it mean to think? Hello, welcome to AI in slow motion. How lovely that you're taking this moment for yourself. Perhaps you're in the middle of your working day. Perhaps you've consciously stepped away for a little while. A coffee break. A brief moment in which nothing needs to be done. For the next few minutes, you can simply listen. If you like, you can keep your eyes open and watch the visuals. Or you can let your gaze soften. Perhaps you'll close your eyes entirely. Whatever feels right for you right now. You don't need to achieve anything. You don't need to understand everything. You don't need to hold on to anything. It's simply enough to be here. As you remain here, you can slowly begin to notice your breath. Perhaps you become aware of breathing in and breathing out again without changing anything. Simply noticing, and as you continue to listen, you may find that your body relaxes just a little. Perhaps your shoulders drop slightly. Perhaps your breathing becomes quieter. Perhaps you don't notice anything in particular. That's perfectly fine. You can take this moment exactly as it is. If you like, imagine that with every breath out, you let go of something, just a little. The last thought, the last conversation, the next task. Not because it needs to disappear, but because it's allowed to wait for a moment. And as the quiet soundscape settles in the background, your attention can slowly open to something that is far older than it might first appear. To a story that began a long time ago and that reaches all the way into this very moment. As you're here and listen, the story of a word, and perhaps also the story of a question that has occupied humans for thousands of years. What does it mean to think? You don't need to answer that question. You can simply carry it with you as you listen. Some things will be clear. Some things will simply drift past. And perhaps at the end, something will remain. A thought, an image, or simply the feeling, I took this moment for myself. When you're ready, let us begin. And if you're not quite there yet, take one more breath and arrive here in your own time. The Renaissance and the early modern period. We have left the Middle Ages behind, but we carry something with us. The idea that artificial intelligence is not merely a dream, but a project that human beings work on with their hands and their tools, with pen and paper, with gear, wheels and symbols. Now we enter a new era, the Renaissance, and with it the early modern period. It is a time when the ideas of the Middle Ages found concrete form, when philosophy and engineering began to speak the same language, when the boundary between art and science, between craft and thought, became more permeable than ever before. It is an era that tends to surprise people because the ideas of this time feel remarkable modern. Let us begin with a man who wanted to know everything. Leonardo da Vinci, born in 1452 in Tuscany. Painter, sculptor, architect, engineer, antagonist. Someone for whom the boundaries between these fields were not real boundaries at all, but simply different paths towards understanding the same world. In his sketches, thousands of them, recorded in notebooks he carried throughout his life. There is something remarkable. A knight made of metal with gear, wheels, cables and levers. A mechanical figure capable of moving its arms and sitting upright. Designed around 1495. Recorded in the Codex Atlanticus. This robotic knight as we would call it today, was the most likely never fully built. But perhaps that is not the most important point. The most important point is the thinking behind it. Leonardo had studied human anatomy as almost no one before him. He had desiccated cadavers in secret at night, which was illegal in his time. He had drawn muscles and joints, tendons and bones, until he understood how movement comes about, how the body functions, what drives it. And then, and this is the decisive step, he asked, if I understand how movement arises, can I then rebuild it? No, imitate, rebuild. That is a different question, a deeper one. And his dissection studies of the brain went further still. He did not only want to understand how the body moves, he wanted to understand where thoughts resides, what the physical foundation of the mind might be. 500 years later, that is one of the central questions of neuroscience. While Leonardo was drawing in his notebooks, the world of mechanics was changing in a different, initially less conspicuous way. The clockmakers in Augsburg, Nuremberg, in the workshops of the German cities, clocks growing complexity were being built in the 15th and the 16th century. Not merely timekeepers, but mechanical theaters, figures that emerges from doorways at certain hours, bells struck by metallic hands, scenes that played out though someone had arranged them in that very moment. These mechanisms were more than entertainment, they were proof that complex, contemporary, ordered sequences could be stored in metal and gear and wheels. That a machine could do what its maker had charged it to do, not once, but again and again, reliably, without thinking. Peter Henlein, a clockmaker from Nuremberg, stood within this tradition. He combined mechanics with time-governed logic. What he built were not thinking machines, but they were machines that followed a plan, that executed a sequence of events their maker had designed. That is, if one thinks about it, the basic principle of an algorithm, not as an abstract concept cast in metal. Then came Descartes, René Descartes, born in 1596 in France, was a mathematician and philosopher who changed the way we think about the mind and the body forever. In his discourse, De la Méthode, published in 1637, he drew a line. On one side, res extensa, extended substance. Everything that occupies space, the body, matter, the machine. On the other side, res cogitans, thinking substance, the mind, consciousness, that which thinks, doubts, and feels. Descartes argued that the human body, like any other body, is a complex machine. The heart pumps like a pump. The muscles move like levers. The lungs breathe like balloons. Only the immaterial mind, the res cogitans, is something different, something that no machine replicate. The distinction had an unexpected consequence. If the body is a machine, then it can be rebuilt. One can immediate movements without needing to resolve the question of consciousness first. One can design systems that perform bodily functions without needing to concern oneself with the mind. This gave engineers philosophical permission to keep building, permission to construct machines that behave like living things without claiming that these machines think. And it laid the foundation for a distinction that remains with us to this day. Weak AI, systems that simulate behavior, and strong AI, systems that truly understand. Descartes did not coin these terms, but he provided the thinking from which they could grow. The 18th century, what has previously only been imagined, began to build. A French engineer born in 1709 created 3 automata that left Europe astonished. The flute player, the mechanical duck, the tower pipe player. The duck is the most celebrated. It could swim, it could quack, it could pick up grain and appear to digest it. A mechanical illusion that imitated biological processes so convincingly that audiences were bewildered. But perhaps even more remarkable, in a certain sense, where the automata of the Swiss clockmakers Between 1768 and 1774, they created 3 figures that still function today. Still today. In a museum, one can watch them perform on the first Sunday of every month. The writer can write up to 40 characters in real ink, and the text is programmable. One can choose what it writes. The draftswoman creates different drawings. The musician plays different melodies. Programmable creativity in metal and ivory in the 18th century. If you let that settle for a moment, these figures still functioning today, still writing and drawing and playing, you may notice how close that world and our world truly are. And finally, Leibniz, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, born in 1646, was one of the most universal thinkers of the modern era, mathematician, philosopher, diplomat, inventor. He dreamed of a language that could make thought computable. He called it the Characteristica Universalis, a symbolic language in which every concept, every thought, every argument could be translated into symbols. And once everything was expressed in symbols, disputes could be resolved like mathematical equations, not through persuasion, through calculation. He imagined that legal judgments could be reached through logical calculus, that philosophical debates could be settled through formal operations. That was not a small thing. It was the idea that thinking at last in certain domains can be replaced by rules. And he built as well his stepped reckoner, a mechanical calculating machine, was a practical attempt to automate mathematical thought, a machine that could add and multiply, that did what the mind does, but without a mind. Leibniz did not see this as a contradiction for him. It was a promise. When you consider this era in its eternity, Leonardo, the clockmakers, Descartes, Vascon, Jacques Dron, Leibniz, you see something remarkable. These people lived in different countries. They spoke different languages. They had different goals. But they were all working on the same question. How far does human skill reach? What can be created that moves by itself, that follows a plan, that perhaps even in its own way thinks find somewhere between Leonardo's sketches and Leibniz's symbolic language, a new idea took shape. The idea that artificial intelligence is not merely a dream, but a project that human beings have been working on for a very long time, perhaps longer than we tend to think. And here we are, at the end of this journey, or perhaps more precisely, at a point from which you can continue in your own time, with your own questions. We have traveled a long way, and all the way here to this moment, you have taken time for a story that most people do not know, for questions that are older than we tend to think, for a term we use every day, and whose depth we rarely pause to consider. That was not a small gift. Take one more moment. If your body has relaxed a little during this time, it may now gently let that go. If your thoughts have been traveling, they may now return here into this space, into this day. Breathe in slowly and out again. And if your eyes have been closed, open them now, in your own time, and let the light back in. Thank you for being here. I wish you a beautiful rest of your day.